All right, welcome back, guys. We have a short video today. It's just finishing up the rest of the material. Like I mentioned in the last video, there was not a lot left. So let's go ahead and get to where we left off. All right, where we left off, we were talking about osteoporosis, a very serious bone condition that can cause weakening of the bones and make them more brittle. This is typically a condition that affects women more than men. It tends to affect women more often due to menopause. So just keep that in mind. Okay, all we got left to talk about are a couple other conditions. Arthritis. Arthritis is going to be inflammation of one or more joints. Remember that the suffix itis, you may have seen that from our integumentary system content, but arthritis is referring to inflammation. So it's inflammation of one or more joints. If I'm not mistaken, there's actually an extra space here. Let's go ahead and delete that. There we go. Breakdown of cartilage can cause the bones to rub together, which leads to pain, inflammation, and stiffness. There are many different types of arthritis, but we're going to be learning 3. Here we see a normal hip joint, right? You see that pink cartilage. You see the hip joint, which is in this like yellow color. When the hip starts, or when the joint starts to deteriorate and there's decreased space, the cartilage itself will also become more worn, and then that causes the bones to grind against each other. Obviously, not good. All right, there are 3 types of arthritis that we are talking about. Osteoarthritis is the most common type. It is caused by wear and tear. What's another name for wear and tear? Living your life, just literally living. Obviously, depending on how active your life is, you will tear down more of that tissue faster. Granted, don't get me wrong, it is 100% beneficial to have an active lifestyle. It's healthier for you, no doubt about it. But you're going to be putting more wear and tear. You're going to be using your joints more often. So you just have to be willing to adapt your lifestyle as you get a little bit older. Just adjust what you're doing. Cartilage breaks down and then the spurs may develop. This is the spurs that we can see right here. They're all right here. These spurs are tissue that form in the bone that are abnormal. They're abscesses. They form there because the bones are grinding on each other, and when the bone tries to heal, it forms these extra tissue. Not a good sign, obviously. It is familial. So this is something that can be genetic. So because it can be genetic, this is something that if you know you have a family member that has it, especially a direct family member, just be aware. It could be passed down to you. But because it's a wear and tear type of condition, it's not something that typically affects people that are young. It's typically something that affects people in their 50s and 60s and so on and so forth. Rheumatoid arthritis. This is a big one. Why we care a lot about rheumatoid arthritis is because it's the first autoimmune condition that we have talked about. Autoimmune diseases are conditions that affect or basically hijack your immune system. Well, the most prominent autoimmune disease that most people are aware of is HIV, which becomes AIDS. The way that HIV is so successful is that it hijacks your immune system and it makes your immune system barely functioning. That's why people die of HIV. It's not because of the virus itself. It's purely because it makes your immune system so weak that the common cold, your bacteria that you deal with daily could kill you. So with regards to rheumatoid arthritis, the body mistakenly attacks healthy tissue. It's going to specifically target the cartilage and destroy the cartilage itself. This is more common in middle-aged people. Women are a little bit more prone to rheumatoid arthritis, but not as bad as like osteoporosis. Here we see a late-stage rheumatoid arthritis. It literally looks like the hand has been run over by a car. You have deformities that can occur. So the thumb deformity, the fingers, what we call swan neck deformity. So pretty serious stuff. Finally, what I think is pretty interesting regarding rheumatoid arthritis is that it's a symmetrical condition, meaning it can affect both sides simultaneously. So for instance, if you have rheumatoid arthritis of the right wrist, it's also going to affect rheumatoid arthritis of the left wrist. So it affects both sides at the same time. Finally, the last type of arthritis we need to talk about is gout. Gout is a type of arthritis that occurs when you build up uric acid in the blood. Uric acid, that sounds familiar. Well, uric acid is in relationship to urine. We secrete uric acid through our urine. You just are able to filter the blood and remove those toxins and turn it into something more stable until you get rid of it. Sometimes people have more uric acid than they need, and that's when things like gout can occur. So when you have too much uric acid, it actually causes crystals, literal crystals to form in the joints. Are these crystals so large that you can physically see them? No. You'd need a microscope to see that. But those crystals can cause inflammation, major inflammation. That inflammation can sometimes be so bad that it can actually puncture the bone and fracture the bone entirely. So that's pretty serious. This is more common in men, and we'll discuss that in just a second. It can affect women post-menopause, and the most common reason of gout, this is not always the case, but the most common reason for gout is alcoholics and alcoholism. That's honestly the reason why men are more affected by this, because men tend to be more alcoholics and tend to drink more, generally speaking, as far as statistics are concerned. Why this is a problem? When you consume alcohol, it is a toxin, right? Your body has to filter it and clean it up with your liver. But if you consume too much of this stuff, then your body has a hard time keeping up. So a lot of it will stay in your blood, and then we form what's called the spiral of gout. So regarding the spiral of gout, the crystals are going to form. As the crystals form, your white blood cells attack to destroy it. Makes sense. Now, as the crystals are destroyed, you're going to be left with these proteins. These proteins are then going to attract more white blood cells, causing more inflammation and pain. That protein also lowers the blood pH, making it more possible for crystals to form, and then the whole cycle continues. Your best bet for something like this with gout, obviously apart from taking proper medication, is going to be diet changes and full-on lifestyle changes. If you're someone who's suffering from alcoholism, obviously, then your best bet is getting help. Physically speaking, mentally speaking, both, because it is both a physical and mental addiction. Okay. Finally, our last condition to talk about is Rickets. Rickets is a rather uncommon condition. It doesn't happen too often in the United States any longer. That said, there are some places of the world where it is more common. Caused by a lack of vitamin D, that is the most common reason why it happens. However, it can also be due to a lack of calcium or phosphate. AKA, if you have lack of calcium or phosphate, it's typically diet. It's typically malnutrition. This can lead to a weakening and deformation of the bones. So the bones themselves can become much more weak and deformed. Here we see three children. The one in the middle is closest to normal bone structure. These two children on the outside are going to have abnormal bone structure, so pointing inward or pointing outward. That vitamin D deficiency is typically due to lack of sun. We learned this back in the integumentary system. On average, it depends on your complexion, right? But on average, you get about 30 minutes of sun, and that's enough sunlight to get proper levels of vitamin D on a daily basis. But there are people who don't get that level of sun, and it's not just because of where you live. Go back 150 years ago, 200 years ago, to the industrial era. In this time period, there were a lot less laws regarding child labor. So it was very common for children to be working in factories, 12 to 14 hours a day. So if you're in a factory for all day long, guess what? You're not getting a lot of vitamin D. And if you're not getting a lot of vitamin D, then your bones will have a direct repercussion to that. So that's what we observe. Now, I mentioned earlier, some countries still have common cases of rickets, or more common cases. So some of those countries are going to be areas of the world that are more impoverished. There's more poverty, less food readily accessible. Other parts of the country or other parts of the world that can have this as well, places where there's not as serious child labor laws. China and India get a lot of flack for this. They do have policies in place to try to restrict child labor, but the countries are massive. There's billions of people there. There's a lot of land. So it makes it more easy for some of these regions to have less restrictive laws, and you still see this happening. And a lot of the products we use come from these countries. So have to keep that in mind. Oh, last thing, is that sometimes rickets can be also due to a vitamin D deficiency caused by a rare genetic linked disorder. It has to do with sex chromosomes, right? If the woman, I guess I can use some colors here. If the woman has the gene for rickets, and we'll say that it's this bluish color, but she's healthy. So we know that she's healthy. So that means she has two X chromosomes, right? One of the X's is healthy, and that purplish color is going to be the rickets or the vitamin D deficiency gene. That means she is phenotypically healthy. Remember, this is all biology, phenotype, genotype. If she were to procreate with someone, and again, if she were to procreate with a man is going to have an X and a Y. And let's say the man is healthy. So the man is XY. If they were to have a child and they were to have a male child, Well, the concern is that you could be giving birth to a child with the X chromosome from the woman. And if it's a boy, it's going to have to be the Y chromosome from the man. And now you're giving birth to a child that has this vitamin D deficiency trait. And it's phenotypic, meaning they're going to express it. So that is something we have to be concerned with when it comes down to our sex-linked diseases and sex-linked disorders. Okay. And that's it. At the very end here, this is just a link to Crash Course. Again, I think Crash Course does a great job of reviewing a material in a short, condensed version. But this was a long one. No doubt about it. This was a long unit. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope I'll see you on the next one when we move on to our next unit.